is a religious war going on in this country. It is a cultural war as critical to the kind of nation we shall be as the Cold War itself, but this war is for the soul of America.
Welcome back to The World Over Live. That was my next guest speaking at the Republican National Convention in 1992, predicting the culture war that has been raging ever since. Now, in May of 2017, a special prosecutor has been named to investigate alleged Russian interference in the U.S. presidential election and any Trump campaign collusion. With talk of impeachment in D.C., Trump's woes are being compared to Nixon's Watergate scandal. Here with analysis is a man who was at Nixon's side, syndicated columnist, former advisor to 3 presidents, including Richard Nixon, and author of the new book, Nixon's White House Wars, The Battles That Made and Broke a President and Divided America Forever. Welcome back to the program, Patrick J. Buchanan.
Good to see you, Raymond.
Great to
How are
see
you?
Look, I can't believe this book. This is a two-parter. I mean, you
Right.
issued, a few years ago, The Great Comeback.
Greatest comeback, Richard Nixon's 3-year comeback from 65 to 68. This takes him into the White House to the exit from the White House. It doesn't have as happy an ending.
Your timing couldn't be better with everything happening in D.C.
Well, exactly right. We're having our Saturday Night Massacre right here in D.C.
Well, let's not go that far.
No.
But I want to get into some of this, some of the news happening. You have Comey being fired by the president. A good idea?
Yeah, it's a good idea. It was not done correctly, but you can't have him in there. I think that Trump doesn't feel he's trustworthy, and there's no doubt his own attorney general or deputy attorney general. Really, the guy, you ought to get your own man in the FBI. I think so. I have no objection to him doing it, but you don't just send a letter over there and hand deliver it by one of your private security guards when he's out speaking on the coast.
And you have no successor picked. I mean, it would have been a good idea to pick a successor.
Sure, if you'd had a successor and you could have worked it out with Comey and then you maybe had the two of them together, I think it'd been done very well. And the Democrats, how are they going to complain? You know, they blame Comey for doing the number on Hillary.
Right, and now you have a special prosecutor named in this investigation of Russian interference in the election and possible collusion with the Trump campaign. What do you make of this? Does this rise to the level of Watergate, which is what we're hearing all over the media?
No, and I shouldn't use Saturday Night Massacre. You're correct. It doesn't. Look, by the time of the quote Saturday Night Massacre in October of 1973, the whole White House had been decapitated. People who had done the Watergate burglary were in prisons doing time, and you had all of these events. And Nixon, decapitated the Department of Justice, fired the independent counsel or special prosecutor, and we shut the whole operation down. And of course, we had to reestablish it. This is simply letting go the head of the FBI. Even Comey said, the president's got a perfect right to fire me.
Tell me about this Rod Rosenstein, who's the Assistant Attorney General. He's come out, he authorized this. Now, some say this is retribution because the Trump White House was trying to say he was the one driving the bus on Comey's dismissal.
Well, Rosenstein, I've heard a lot about Rosenstein. He's very well respected as independent. He worked for George W. Bush. He's a Maryland U.S. attorney, and he worked for Barack Obama. And they did, in effect, hang him out to dry by saying that the memo he prepared, which Trump asked him to prepare, with all the egregious things that Comey had done, was the reason Trump finally decided to fire him. So they put that out, and Pence and everyone said, that's the reason Comey's going. And then Trump says the next day, I've been wanting to get rid of that guy since I walked into the White House. And so now that fellow, Rosenstein, without alerting the White House, sandbagged the President of the United States, named what is basically a special prosecutor, Robert Mueller, very respected guy, former director of the FBI. And I think he's going to be gearing up, and you're going to have a Watergate-style special prosecutor with a great number of FBI agents and special prosecutors working on it. And it's going to take a long time. This will take years like they do. And one of those took down Nixon, and another one got Bill Clinton impeached.
And Pat, you know how this thing rolls.
Sure.
They have wide latitude in their investigatory powers. They can tap into anything, and then they can prosecute at their own command. The biggest challenge I see, and I'd love your comment on this, once you have a special prosecutor pulling out West Wing staff and saying, we need to talk to you, we need to talk to you, they're all going to have to get lawyered up. What will happen, do you think, to whatever fragile cohesion exists in the White House today?
Well, I think a lot of people in the White House staff are looking, if they were in any way connected with decisions Trump made, which are now being investigated. You're right. I mean, with due respect, I got calls, come on over to the special prosecutor. I was hauled before the grand jury. I was hauled before the Watergate committee, you know, and I had no role in the break-in or the cover-up of Watergate. And these fellows, I know fellows that work with me, they had to get lawyers. They weren't making much money, had to get lawyers. So I think what's going to happen is these prosecutors, what they do is they start working, going up the food chain, telling the lower folks, look, we don't want to prosecute you, take you into court. You got to give us this. We're going to have to give you some kind of sentence now. Tell us what happened here, and do you have anything else? So, but this is a long, long process, and you go up all the way up. And the ultimate goal, obviously, I mean, if you got an independent counsel, is that the President of the United States is something of a citizen under suspicion.
Wow. Talk about the Trump agenda. Well, before we do that, I want to show you this. This is Donald Trump speaking at the Coast Guard commencement in Connecticut on Wednesday, reacting to everything he's seeing in the media and the appointment of this special prosecutor. Watch.
Look at the way I've been treated lately, especially by the media. No politician in history, and I say this with great surety, has been treated worse or more unfairly. You can't let them get you down.
Your reaction to this, Pat Buchanan, as someone who was director of communications in the Reagan White House, you practically were director of communications in the Nixon White House too. What your reaction to this?
I think he's accurate in what he said. I've never seen anyone pounded and beaten up as viciously as Trump has for 18 months of the campaign and now, 110, 120 days of the presidency. However, he lets them get to him. I think he gets embattled with them every day. And I think that's a mistake. When I wrote those speeches for Spiro Agnew, it was after a full year when we were trying to get along and, you know, advance our programs. We had to turn around and defend ourselves from an attack. But once we did and launched these two strikes against media, you move away and get back to your agenda. The problem the president's got, he's got a terrific agenda in a lot of areas. I really agree with him. It's one of the reasons I supported him. But he lets himself be distracted and driven off his message. But it gets to him. Look at him. You could see him right there.
Yeah. There are many lessons. When I was reading your book, the memo you sent to Nixon deep into, when you were deep in Watergate after Haldeman was gone and everybody was flying out of the White House, you say, get back on message. We have to be proactive and on the offensive here. Meaning get back to what the American people sent you here for. If the Trump administration can't do that, and this White House is somehow undone, what will be the impact on the ideas that you have long championed and this agenda?
Well, I think the unique parts of the Trump agenda are ideas that we argued about in the 1990s campaigns, you know, secure the border, America first, get out of these foreign wars, you know, stop these trade agreements that are deindustrializing our country, taking all these jobs. And that is somewhat antithetical to the Republican conservative base in the Congress. And I think if Trump is the indispensable man to getting these through, and frankly, if Trump loses the support of a decisive margin in the House and Senate and in the party, and his staff is running over to the special prosecutor, I really wonder what he can get accomplished in that. And you're looking at a real bloodbath in 2018, and you're looking at something up on the Hill if he doesn't pull out of this dive.
Yeah. Do you ever stand back, Pat, and you're watching this play out? I'm certainly during the campaign. These were the very same ideas, even the same slogans that you coined in 1992 and 1996 and 2000. America first, eschewing the globalist project, concern about border security and
Buchanan
protecting.
fence.
Buchanan fence, Pitchfork Pat and the Buchanan brigades, right down to America first and make America first again, which was your line. Do you get royalty checks from the Trump administration at this point?
Let me tell you, one of the reasons I was for Trump, I was astonished watching the campaign that he revived these ideas, and I predicted as soon as he came out, I said, look, he's in the 16 now, Sweet 16. He's going to be in the Final Four, and my guess is he's going to make the Final Two. I don't know if the Republican establishment can take him down because they don't agree with these ideas and they're a majority. But darned if he didn't take these all the way to the nomination and the presidency. Those are the ideas that won Wisconsin, the Northern Catholic folks in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania and Ohio and Michigan. That's what gave him the presidency of the United States. And let me say, both my wife Shelley and I were elated with his victory, and I am apprehensive about what this is going to do to his agenda, what we believe in, what we all worked for.
I was just in Boston, and a fellow Lou Murray there who worked the Trump campaign bumped into me during my travels there. And he said something I thought was interesting. He said, you know, Trump stopped campaigning. He's now moved to governance. Meanwhile, Hillary Clinton announced this week what is essentially a political operation called Onward Together, where she's going to keep, her campaign's just going to keep going on. Right. Was it a mistake to shutter the political operation in the Trump campaign? Should he have continued that to better message his agenda so that he wouldn't hit these roadblocks?
I think so, but let me say this. He has a number of times, you can see that's where he feels he gets the electric strength, the connection with the people. You've seen him go out. He went out, I think one of them was Harrisburg, Pennsylvania,
right,
where he gets these mammoth crowds, and he gets sustenance, I think, and he gets energy out of them. But you can't do it quite as often as you mean on the campaign. That's what you did. You had 2 of those crowds every day.
Right.
And the trouble is, when the election's over, the American people fall silent, and the voices in the city rise up and get louder and louder in the city. And the deep state is coming after Donald Trump.
Let's talk for a moment about 2 quick news items before we dive into Nixon and his last years and the lessons to be learned. All across parts of the South, in my hometown of New Orleans, in Richmond, Virginia, they are contemplating, and in the case of New Orleans, you can see the video, taking down these Confederate markers and statues of Confederate figures, including Robert E. Lee, P.G.T. Beauregard. Your thoughts on this? You're a historian. Your family fought in the Civil War.
Family fought in the Civil War, and my great-grandfather, he was at Atlanta holding a musket when Sherman's army's coming down and to burn the city, and he was captured and put into a Chicago prison. He was the aggressor in the war, not Sherman. But look, I think it's appalling. I mean, the statue of Lee is magnificent. I've seen it. And the other one, the 1874 statue, the uprising against the Andrew Johnson's policy and Grant's policy and the rest of it. I mean, this is an event in history. It's part of American history. The war is the most written about thing in American history. And to tear these down, it's really a secular desecration is going on, and it's really iconoclastic, and it's something you expect of barbarians.
Mitch Landrieu, the mayor of New Orleans, he would say that these are symbols of racism. They splinter a community, they divide the community, and that without them, you can imagine a new future together. You would say what?
If that's what you're doing, then you're not going to have any unity, because the people that believe that those people fought for their land, their independence from the Union, just as we fought for our independence from the British, it was an heroic event, it was an evil event. Slavery was an evil thing, but good heavens, if you tear down the statues of, I just came by Union Station, there was Columbus up there.
Yeah, he may be the next to come down.
That's what I'm going to say. I'm going to write a column and say, look, Columbus is up there in front of you. But I mean, what is going on in this country? It does reflect the fact that in terms of belief and what's in their hearts and what they love and what they hate, we're 2, 3, 4 countries. We're not one country anymore. You
know, this reminds me of something you wrote in 1969 in a memo to Richard Nixon. You write, America is no longer one nation and one people, but a land divided by war and race and culture and politics. You still feel that way?
Oh, I do indeed, even more so now, but it's more evenly divided now. We won a 49-state landslide, taking those arguments, but there's no doubt about it. That's a consequence of the 60s. Let me tell you, I grew up in D.C., and the D.C. of Eisenhower, I used to caddy at Burning Tree when he'd come over there, and even John F. Kennedy. It was basically a united country in terms of beliefs and their fundamentals of Christianity and how we got your moral beliefs and things. All of that, by the end of the 60s, at least on the campuses, all of that was thrown out, the basis of your morality, of your culture and everything. And something new and different, secularist certainly, hedonistic was coming in, and that philosophy of life, if you will, has captured a huge part of the country. And it's behind that deep divide, and it's hard for me to ever see us coming together again.
You know, in 1969 and in the subsequent campaign of Nixon, he really won by embracing the Buchananite idea of the silent majority.
Exactly.
Which was yours.
Phrase.
Why was he able to win using that? Donald Trump was able to win with that Buchananite mindset and even the title, the silent majority, but Pat Buchanan couldn't.
Well, because when we ran in 1992, I mean, I came 10 weeks off a cable news show and challenged the President of the United States, who was beating me about 65 to 15. And so we did come close and challenge
you
him
closed
with the
the gap
ideas.
to 15 points.
Yeah, the ideas we raised really got a tremendous reception, and we came close to the President, and New Hampshire and Georgia, and then were wiped out. But the point is, the issues were not mature. When I went out there, I went down to the fence at Tijuana, for example, and a congressman took me down. He knew the problem. He showed me the problem. And I said, obviously, 5,000 people walking in every weekend, you need a fence here to protect it at least 11 miles inland. By the time I got in 96, it had moved over to Tucson, you know. But what happened is, by the time Trump came in here, I mean, in the first 10 years of the 21st century, we lost 6 million jobs in 55,000 factories. Then you could get up and say, we're being deindustrialized, we're losing factories and jobs, and people say, you bet we are. Here's what we lost in Ohio, to communities, towns, states. The devastation of failing to adopt policies by Bush, by Clinton, by Bush II, by Obama, left the consequences in there, in the country, that people looked at and said, Trump is right when he's talking about this. And at least he identifies the causes of it, and he's going to do something about it. And the other Republicans are swimming along ideas, you know, that worked in the late Reagan years, but we're not in that era anymore.
What was the turning point for you, Pat? I mean, because you were a free trader, you didn't raise any hackles when Reagan signed his immigration order and allowed the amnesty to take place.
No.
What happened in the late Reagan era into '92 when you decided to take on George H.W. Bush?
Well, there's one, you know, the trade thing was, Milton Friedman wrote me a letter in 1991, 92, and says, Patrick, you're doing the devil's work here. Exact phrase. But the real thing that changed was the end of the Cold War. I mean, this is the cause of my life. I'd gone into journalism in 60, 61, right. 30 years, 3 presidencies and things. That's what we fought again, to defeat the Soviet Empire. And all of a sudden, the Soviet Empire collapsed. The Soviet Union comes apart. Communism is dead. Europe is free. We said, okay, what is our foreign policy now? And then you start looking at what's happening. Why don't we build up our country? And what is bringing it down? So you think all this through, and you come to the conclusion that, you know, free trade, and then I wrote a book on it, that free trade, that wasn't the way the country was built. So you read back into the foreign policy and the history of the country, and you came up with these ideas, and that this is the way this is new. And I agree with you. I was a free trader. I was very high on, you know, immigration, pro-immigration. I was for every measure in the Cold War, except for Reagan putting those guys in Lebanon.
Right.
But at the end of the Cold War, this is a new world. People said, look, it is and was an epical event. You know, something has changed. It's like after World War I, you know, the Habsburg Empire is not coming back.
Right, you got to
gone.
figure something else out.
And so in all of these countries, the Brits and the French are still going up there collecting the colonies. It's not going to last, friends.
When I was reading Nixon's White House Wars, I kept thinking there's a Catholic strategy that you unveil here,
They talk
which
about
was
the Southern strategy.
Yeah, they talk about the Southern strategy. They never talk about
No.
the Catholic strategy, which was yours. Tell people what that is. How did it contribute to Nixon's success and Trump's, by the way?
And Reagan's.
And Reagan's.
Okay, here's how. The Northern Catholics were the Catholic community I grew up in. My father's folks, the folks of the Holy Name Society and the Catholic schools, they were Democrats, all of them Democrats. They were Truman. They didn't like Dewey, you know. So they were Truman, but however, socially, culturally, politically, in a lot of ways, they were, you know, they have no objection to Social Security, but what are these kids doing, burning down their campuses? What are they doing with, you know, the sexual revolution, all these revolutions, gay rights and all these things? And culturally, it was profoundly offensive. Also, you got abortion, and you got, you know, handing out birth control and the rest of it. And so they were alienated from their party, and, you know, but they were strongly anti-communist. So we told Nixon, I said, look, the Catholics are the decisive vote that gives all of these northern states to the Democratic Party, and they're naturally more allied with us. They may disagree with us on right to work, and they may disagree with us. The Republicans, you know, we're going to chop everything up. So we can reach these folks culturally, socially, and on these issues, and the Lord blessed us with George McGovern as the nominee of the Democratic Party, you know, for he's going to crawl to Hanoi and stuff. These people don't crawl to anybody. So we brought the Catholic vote in the North, shifted over. Nixon got 22% of the Catholics in 60, 33% in 68, 55% in 72, brought all of them through in the northern cities, and then we brought the Wallace folks in the Deep South and the conservative Southern, patriotic, but they like pork and all those things. You got to accommodate them, and so you got them on all of these issues. And what we had is the Goldwater-Nixon coalition inside the party, Northern Catholic, Southern Protestants, 49 states to 1 in 72. Reagan put 49 states to 1 in 1984. Quick statement about Reagan. I went into his White House in 85. I said, "Congratulations, Mr. President, 49 states to 1, you lost only Minnesota." He said, "I didn't lose Minnesota, Pat." He was telling me he thought they stole it.
They stole it. Let's talk for a second, Pat. There is a memo in the book where you relate to Nixon your opinion of the media, and you say, the media is to us what the mongoose is to the cobra. Do you still think that stands true?
Oh, it's even more so with Trump, because the media are much more open about their hostility and dislike of Trump, and certainly Trump is much more open and constant about his detestation of the media. Really, this is a war going on here. Teddy White described Nixon and the Washington Post as two scorpions in a bottle. One hates the other, and the other hates them. And I think with Trump, there's no doubt about it. But I will say this: I mean, don't believe a constant war with the press is the right approach. But the press isn't going to go away. Somebody's going to lose this war. And the press lost with Nixon in 72, but they sure got him back in 74.
Now, we have to remind everybody, this is the man talking who wrote the speech for Agnew that savaged the press. And, of course, his numbers went through the roof. But you think Trump leans on that trope too often?
He does. I mean, we wrote 2 speeches, but they're fairly high, very high level. They talked about the power and the bias and the bigotry of the network, 20 people running what goes through the networks, and 2/3 of the country relies upon, and how we ought to have dispersed this power. And I mean, it was a powerful argument. I had journalism teachers who were very liberal that said, "Where did you get that? That's what I believe too." And so I mean, that worked. And then the New York Times and the Washington Post attack a week later also worked. Important thing, they were televised by all 3 networks. But again, to every day go after the media, I don't know that it's, I mean, you ought to move off that. I mean, Nixon talked about that, and we all talked about it. Agnew, now he should calm him down. We should focus on this. Get to talking about the agenda and the issues.
It was a way to get you back to the agenda.
I will say this, they wanted the red meat out in that provinces.
They got it. Let's talk for a second, Pat. I mean, while we're talking about media, Roger Ailes died this week. Really a great innovator at both CNBC and later at Fox. He created an alternative media source that became a refuge for so many people. With his removal, some think it might have been a choreographed removal. Does this leave Trump's movement and your ideas vulnerable?
Yes, it does. I mean, Fox is not all behind the specific Trump issues. Trump is the indispensable man here, but I agree with you. He's got talk radio behind him. He's got a good presence on the internet, and he also has. But Fox is in a way indispensable, I think. And if Fox departs, I think some of the Republicans depart. You lose your margins. You can't get anything done. So you just play out the game.
Wow.
The rest of the game.
I wish we had another hour, but I need to ask you 2 quick questions. The Death of the West, a book you wrote 20 years ago, was really about the demographic winter coming not only to Europe, but to the United States as well, but particularly Europe. 20 years later, looking at what's happening in Europe, you see what? And would you change anything you wrote in that book?
Requiescat in pace for Europe, in my judgment. There's not a single nation in Europe, except maybe Iceland's got a birth rate that will enable it to replace its existing native-born population. People are dying now coming across the Mediterranean. Some statistics I got from the UN recently, there are 1.1 billion people in Africa today. 2050, 2 billion. 2100, 4 billion. They're not going to stay there under the destitution and despotism. They're all coming to Europe. The Europeans are dying out. And in addition now, people are reacting there. Look at the secessionist movements, the rejection of the EU, the demand to secure the borders. All of these issues are raising up these parties, and none of them has gone over the top except for Brexit yet. but they're going to continue to grow. But I really, when you look at the long run, it is hard to be sanguine about the future of Western civilization.
Final question, Pat. You who were such a pioneer, not only in communications politically, but in television. You were one of the pioneers in television and cable
Crossfire's
TV.
responsible for a lot.
Right. When you look at the whole world now,
Right.
the hyper-politicization of everything, from sports to entertainment to music, I mean, there is very little that unites us today that isn't ideologically charged. What is the answer? How do we stay together? What holds us together as a people?
You don't, because the media, I think Crossfire was an excellent show, and I was talking to someone else earlier. It was an excellent show, back and forth, and presented, left and right in America, and cultural issues. But what we got now is everyone gets on television. It's 24-hour cable. It's ongoing, and there's a premium on conflict. And the more hostile the conflict, the better, because that's better ratings. So that's all propelling all of these people to, get more and more deeply into that. You're on shows now where you can't understand. I'm sitting here.
Know what they're saying.
I can't understand the people sitting beside you.
No, they may as well be speaking Farsi.
I don't know whether it was Saturday Night Live. They had that thing they showed where we were going. They had Larry King there, and they had 25 boxes.
All around, like the Brady Bunch, metastasized.
They're all talking.
Yeah, everybody's
right.
talking at once.
Yeah.
Patrick J. Buchanan,
pleasure.
thank you so much
Take
for
it
being
easy,
here.
right.
The book, Nixon's White House Wars, The Battles That Made and Broke a President and Divided America Forever, by Patrick Buchanan, is available at bookstores and online everywhere. Go grab it.